Hi guys, Olive here. Here today to do something a little bit embarrassing and hopefully entertaining. Today I'm going to be reacting to my very first book haul that I ever did on this channel. I just celebrated 7 full years on BookTube. I uploaded my very first BookTube video on January 27th, 2015. So I have now been on BookTube for 7 full years. And for any of you who have been around since the beginning or have gone back and watched some of my older videos, I've gone through quite the evolution over the years. If you go back and watch my early videos, I've obviously gotten a lot better at making these BookTube videos. I've had a lot of practice and I pay attention to what works and what doesn't work, and I make changes based on that. My production values are now a lot better. I have lighting. I have a nicer camera. I have a microphone. So the actual finished product that I put out there is a lot better quality just when it comes to that. But also, I'm 7 years older. But in today's video, we're going to see just how far I've come, because I'm going to watch the second video I ever posted on this channel. My first video was an introduction video. I was just kind of saying what I wanted to do with this channel. And then my second video was a very belated Christmas book haul. I had been thinking about starting my own channel for a long time, and so I had kind of put my Christmas books to the side, thinking that I would eventually get around to filming a book haul. And then I didn't end up starting my channel until almost the very end of January. So I was very inexperienced when I made this video. I know for a lot of YouTubers, not just booktubers, but just YouTubers in general, it can be very cringy to go back and watch your very early content, especially if your newer content, your current content is a lot different and hopefully a lot better. But I do think it's important for us to recognize where we came from. I'm not going to say I'm not going to have some uncomfortable moments as I watch this. I'm sure I will. But who I was back then, that was part of my journey to become who I am today. And the core of who that Olive was is still who I am today. I've just been doing this for a lot longer. I know a lot more about this. So I thought it would be fun to watch this video, and I can react to it and tell you what was going on in my life at the time, give some context to that video. And also, I want to see how many of those books I have read. If there are any that are still sitting on my shelves, it might be a wake-up call that I should probably get around to reading those. So without further ado, let's watch this video. Hi everybody, Olive here. And for the very first time, I'd like to do a book haul. This is obviously a very, very belated Christmas book haul, since it is now almost the end of January. But since I just started my channel and I had all of these books that I had yet to shelve in anticipation of making this video, I thought I'd share a little bit of what I received, what I bought for myself, all sorts of Christmas goodness. So in this video, we were in our second ever apartment in Pittsburgh. It was a high-rise building that overlooked a highway, and it was very noisy. I don't know if you can hear in the background of that video all that extra noise. I didn't know at this point how to filter out that noise in the background, but that noise was constant. At first, it kind of bothered me when we first moved to that place, but then it kind of became comforting. It was like a background white noise. I got used to it, but obviously it wasn't the greatest to film BookTube videos in that apartment with that noise going on. Although when I was in this apartment, I do remember I learned exactly what a fender bender sounds like, because that stretch of highway, there were so many accidents there all the time. I'm assuming there still are, but I could hear, like, I would be in our kitchen, which is far away from the window, and I could hear a fender bender happen. So I've never been in one myself, thankfully, but I know what they sound like. And where I'm sitting in this room was just our big living room. It was a very, very small apartment. It was like a huge living room area that had a dining room attached, a little tiny kitchen that only one person could be in at a time because it was teensy. And then there was just one bedroom. And we bought these bookshelves. The ones behind me in this video are the ones behind me right now. We got these from IKEA, and we got them new when we were in this apartment. And I don't think they would have fit in the bedroom. No, we had way too much stuff in there. So they had to go in the living room. So I could only film when my husband wasn't home or didn't mind just being off to the side while I filmed, which was a little bit awkward. And then I also had to lock our cat, Theodora, who we had just gotten around this time. We got her in like the middle of 2014. So yeah, she was pretty new to our family at this time. And she was just as mouthy back then as she is now. She's even more mouthy now. She just talks all the time. She's constantly meowing at you. I would have to lock her in the bedroom because she would just be meowing throughout the entire video. So this is me with no tripod using an old camcorder of my husband's that he just had lying around. It was balanced on a chair, which was on top of an end table in a living room with all this background noise. Maybe my husband was even there for this video. I don't remember. So yeah, this was all very low tech at the time. I was literally just using what was available to me. I didn't want to invest any money in BookTube because I wasn't 100% sure I was going to stick around, because you just don't know whether or not you're going to like it until you try it. So the first thing that I bought is Joan Didion's The Year of Magical Thinking. And I read on the back of this book that this book talks a lot about dealing with loss. And I've heard so many good things about Joan Didion and have yet to read any of her books. All right, the first book in this book haul is one that I just read back in December, Joan Didion's The Year of Magical Thinking. And wow, I did not realize that it had been sitting on my shelf for that long. I picked it up because of the news about Joan Didion recently. She just very recently passed away. And yeah, I think I had heard about The Year of Magical Thinking on BookTube. I was watching a lot of BookTube at this time. If there was an adult BookTube channel out there in 2015, I was probably watching it. And I'm pretty positive I saw The Year of Magical Thinking on, I think her name was Ashley, Climb the Stacks. I'm pretty sure her name was Ashley. She talked about The Year of Magical Thinking. What I didn't say in this video is that this was the first book by Joan Didion that I had ever bought, but I had actually tried to read one of her fiction books. I had got it from the library. I had heard a lot about her when I was getting involved in the book world in 2013, 2014. I had heard a lot about Play It As It Lays, and I wanted to try it. So I checked it out from the library and it was not for me. I just didn't like it. I don't know if I would like it now that I'm a more experienced fiction reader, but I know back then either it wasn't for me or I wasn't ready for it. Because at this time in my life, I was mainly a nonfiction reader. I've spoken about this several times over my channel's history, but I had read a lot of nonfiction in college. That's what I was used to. That's what I liked. And so coming into the bookish world that was so fiction dominated, it was a little bit intimidating for me, to be honest, because I considered myself a nonfiction reader. Left to my own devices, that's what I would pick up. So I was kind of grasping on to any pieces of advice regarding fiction I could find at the time. And a lot of people like Joan Didion. Maybe that would be a good exercise for me to try Joan Didion's fiction again, because I'm obviously a lot more comfortable with reading fiction now. But I definitely did need to go on that journey of learning who I was as a fiction reader, and I was at the very start of that journey when I made this video. That's so funny that I just read The Year of Magical Thinking. I'm actually really glad I didn't pick it up at this time. And I'm also really glad I didn't pick it up until many years later, because I don't think I would have been in the right headspace for it back then. I hadn't gone through a significant grief myself at this moment in my life. That was yet to come for me, unfortunately. And also, I wasn't used to reading literary memoir. I didn't even really like memoir that much at this time. That's another thing BookTube got me into. I tried memoir because of BookTube. I was a nonfiction reader, but I wasn't really a big memoir reader until BookTube. So I have lots of things to thank BookTube for. The next book I got from Half Price Books is No One Is Here Except All of Us by Ramona Asubel. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly. To be honest, I don't know a whole lot about this one besides the fact that I was sold by the cover. I know you're not supposed to judge a book by its cover. I think that saying actually pertains more to people and situations than books, because clearly we judge books by their covers. And this one is gorgeous. It has birch trees, which if I ever give you a look at my living room, is birch tree dominated. This is so entertaining because I can tell that some things about me from back then are going to be completely different, and then other things are going to be exactly the same. And one thing that is exactly the same is that I still really, really love birch trees. So my living room back then was kind of birch tree themed, and I've continued that to our current living situation. And I still think that the cover of No One Is Here Except All of Us by Ramona Acebel, I've since learned how to pronounce her name, I still think that cover is gorgeous. But I do remember that I tried to read this book at one point and I ended up DNFing it. I don't remember exactly why, but I just wasn't that into it. I know that much. And it was a shame because I had read one of her later books called Sons and Daughters of Ease and Plenty. I had read that book first before this one, even though I acquired that one later, and I really liked that one. I remember it took place over Labor Day weekend, and it was just such a perfect end of summer kind of book. It had that feeling to it. I remember really liking that one, so I picked up this one. I thought it was going to be a sure thing for me since I had already read something from that author I really liked, and then I didn't like it. And that was a bummer. That was a really hard one for me to unhaul because I thought it was so beautiful. The next book I got for myself, The Marriage Plot by Jeffrey Eugenides. Again, I have heard so many good things about Jeffrey Eugenides, and he seems to be a very popular and very successful living author. There are so many reasons why I'm glad I'm doing wrap-ups and TBRs again, but one of the reasons, and I know some of you have noticed this as well as you've watched my wrap-ups and TBRs over the years, there's something so pure about a TBR video talking about books that you haven't read yet, and all that anticipation and excitement is there to read those books, and then the wrap-up comes. And the difference between how I talk about a book in my TBR to how I talk about it in my wrap-up can sometimes be very entertaining. Because if you watch the wrap-up first and then go back and watch the TBR, it's like, oh, my sweet summer child, if you only knew how much you were not going to like that book, you wouldn't have that smile on your face. And that's how I feel watching this video right now. I hated The Marriage Plot. In fact, it might be my least favorite book of all time. On paper, I can see why I bought this, because it's a love triangle, it's a campus novel, and it focuses a lot on Jane Austen-esque marriage plots. That's why it's called The Marriage Plot, as I'm pretty sure the female main character is studying those in school. So on paper, this is a book I should love. If you were to make one of those blind date with a book packages and write love triangle, campus novel, main character who studies Jane Austen, I would buy that today. But I just hated this book. I thought it was so incredibly pretentious. I felt like it was just a very thinly veiled retelling of something that happened to Jeffrey Eugenides in college. Some girl didn't want him. She wanted another dude instead. It's just awful. It is Wild Alone by Krasi Zorkova. And I've actually already read this one. I've obviously read Wild Alone since I had already read it at the time I was showing it to you in this video. As I was watching this, the only thing that kept coming into my mind, my main memory from that book, was Twilight. It definitely did remind me of Twilight. This would have been a little bit late for Twilight-esque things to be coming out, but I feel like the publishing industry is always a little bit behind on trends because of how slow the whole publishing machine is. So I'm assuming that the author of this book wrote it during the peak of that vampire mania that was going on at the time. And then by the time the book came out, people were starting to become over it. I was never a Twilight fan. I think I was in high school and college at the time. Like, I was focused on school and other things. So Twilight was never my thing. And I remember there were parts of this that I liked. And it's a shame that I didn't end up liking it more, because I remember this was one of the first authors I had ever had personal contact with. I had posted a picture of the book on Instagram because it is so incredibly beautiful. I loved that cover. I still do. And I think she thanked me for showing the book, and we talked a little bit, and she was so incredibly nice. I ended up feeling really bad that I didn't like her book more. Both of these books were available in American editions,
but I preferred the British editions and I was willing to wait to have the prettier covers. The first one is Diving Bells by Lucy Wood, and you can tell from my bookmark I'm currently reading this. Just look at how pretty it is.
Diving Bells, it's so funny because I still remember stories from that. I did go through and read the rest of it after I made this video, and I thought it was great. But in my mind at the time, I guess I didn't think I was going to reread it because I guess I wasn't super into short stories, and I'm still working to become super into short stories, but I got rid of it, as I do with books I don't think I'm going to reread. And I'll say that there are very few occasions when I regret the choice to let go of a book. I sell a lot of books to my local used bookstore. If you go to used bookstores in Pittsburgh, you'll probably end up seeing some of my books there. I sell a lot of books because I just have a lot of books coming in and out of this reading room, but I regret getting rid of Diving Bells. I would really like to revisit it, especially as a reader now with more experience reading fiction, more experience reading short stories. I think I'm actually going to go hunt down a copy of that exact edition because I still believe it's really beautiful. I would love to own it, and I would really like to reread it. It's settled. I'm getting another copy of it.
The next book I ordered for myself is Pavlovsk, The Life of a Palace by Suzanne Massie. Now, anyone who's a little bit familiar with Russian history and Russian history writing probably knows the name Robert K. Massie. He's written probably the big biographies. He wrote a great biography recently of Catherine the Great, and then he wrote one of my favorite books of all time, the biography of Nicholas and Alexandra. This is his former wife, who's obviously also interested in Russia, and Pavlovsk is a palace in St. Petersburg, or just slightly outside of the city of St. Petersburg, named for Pavel, or Paul I, who is Catherine the Great's son. I was lucky enough to go to Pavlovsk when I studied abroad in St. Petersburg, and I got to tour it with my wonderful Russian friend and tutor. I'm really looking forward to reading more in depth about the palace and the history behind it, and hopefully reading about it will take me back there a little bit.
You can tell just by watching that how much I was missing Russia at that time. Around that time in my life, I was trying to figure out what my next steps were career-wise. And I was considering, I think just a year or two before I started my BookTube channel, I was considering moving to Russia for a year to teach English. And I didn't end up doing that. I think that would have been really hard for me and my now husband to be apart from each other for that length of time. But I was really, really missing Russia. Going to Russia was the best time in my life. I really miss it. I really miss it still. But you can tell how much I loved Russia, even from my second video. That's pretty impressive.
Now, this next book is a little bit of a gift and a little bit of something I purchased for myself, and I'll tell you why. This is Hunger by Elise Blackwell, and this is a very short novel, I would call it a novella, that takes place during the siege of Leningrad. The reason why I say this book is half something I bought for myself and half a gift is because after I already bought it for myself, I received it as a gift, as a late Christmas gift from my sister. I can't really decide which edition I like better, but if I end up loving it, then I have two.
I did end up reading that one, and I can show you which edition I ended up keeping because it was right behind me on this shelf. It's the one with the apples here. This is a novel set during the siege of Leningrad, and I remember it being very good. I read it after City of Thieves. I think that's the reason I ended up buying this one. Well, this one I received as a gift, as I said. The other one I bought for myself, but I really wanted to read it, which is why I bought it for myself ahead of receiving this as a gift. And I remember getting really aggravated by some of the Goodreads reviews because I remember them being very critical of the main character, because the main character makes some immoral choices because it was the siege of Leningrad. Everyone was going hungry. If you've not read anything about the siege of Leningrad, I highly recommend you do to understand the historical context. I've been to one of the mass graves when I was in St. Petersburg, we'll just put it that way, and I was never the same after that. But I thought it was so unfair for reviewers to be making judgment calls when we can't say, when we're not in that situation, what we would have done or the choices we would have made to save ourselves. I think you don't know what you're going to do until you're in a situation like that, and all of us are lucky that we haven't been in a situation like that. Clearly, it still gets under my skin after all these years.
An Uncommon Education by Elizabeth Purser.
So this is another one from this haul that I have read. I'm pretty sure I read it in 2015 when I made this haul, and I absolutely loved it. I still own it. It's on this middle shelf behind me somewhere. I would get it, but just take my word for it. It's back there somewhere. It is a campus novel. I do think they compared it a little bit too much to The Secret History, and so I remember some people on Goodreads being disappointed by it because it didn't meet expectations. I think there are parts of it that are like The Secret History, but it's not a full Secret History clone. The first half of it is actually much more of a coming-of-age novel. I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
The first one is From Splendor to Revolution, The Romanov Women by Julia P. Gallardi. This book obviously talks about all the women from the Romanov dynasty, and paging through it, I was really excited to see the name Xenia, or the Russian version Ksenia, who was Nicholas II's sister. I just got done reading a biography about her. That book was horribly written and only kept me going because I am so interested in the subject matter. So I'm hoping this book talks about her and all the other Romanov women with a lot more grace.
This book is actually on my TBR for this month. I was picking books for my January TBR and I went over to my Russia shelf like, I need to put a Russia book on my TBR. It's been way too long and I miss reading about Russia. And that's the one I picked. I did get it wrong in this older video, though. It doesn't talk about all of the Romanov women in the way that I thought it did. It talks about 4 Romanov women, 2 who were born into the family and 2 who married into the family. But it only focuses on those main 4 women. And it was funny hearing myself talk about that Ksenia biography because I very distinctly remember sitting inside a Panera where I read a lot of books at the time and just thinking how horrible it was. So that's funny. I haven't thought about that book in a really long time.
And it is Red Fortress by Catherine Meredale. This book talks about the history of the Kremlin, which is the very center of Moscow.
This one I haven't read yet. I can look at my Russia shelf right behind my camera and see it. It's right there, still needing to be read.
Starlight Symphonies of Oak and Glass by Alexandria Nolan. I did read a little bit about this one. It seems to be the story of a magical lake set in Michigan in the 19th century.
This one I read as well, and I'm pretty sure I read this one in 2015. I think I read it that summer, so only a few months after I filmed this video. Apparently, I used to be a lot better at buying books and then just reading them, or in this case, receiving it as a gift. I remember putting this one on my wish list. I remember my mom buying it for me. She was all excited about it because she thought it looked great, and I really liked it. And I've since read other things from this self-published author, and I thought they were decent, but not as good as this one. Although this one does have a sequel and I do own it, so I should probably read that.
So that wraps up my very first book haul. Thank you so much for tuning in and seeing how shallow I am in my book purchases and buying only for their covers. Well, not only, but just mostly. Looking forward to having these gorgeous books on my shelves and reading them in the very near future. Until next time. Bye.
So that was the very first book haul that I ever filmed. Very interesting going back and watching that. A lot has changed. If you go and watch one of my latest book hauls, you will see some differences. Like, I didn't know nearly as much about the books in that book haul as I do in my book hauls now. I actually spend time researching what those books are about, so I have something to tell you in the book haul. Instead of just kind of yammering on about why I wanted the book in the first place, I actually like to know something about the book now. I hadn't really developed my own style yet. You can get hints of my personality, but obviously I'm still getting used to talking to a camera. My editing is atrocious. All of that noisy traffic in the background is very distracting. I'm just much better at this now. It's actually really cool to see that a lot of those books that I hauled in January of 2015, I've read them. A lot of them I read that exact same year. I wish that were still my cadence of picking up a bunch of books one year and reading them within that exact same year. I hope to get back there someday. But this was really fun. It's really interesting looking back at that time in my life and remembering where I was at and what I was interested in reading, who I was as a reader, the early part of my booktube channel. It's such a moment in time, and it's really cool that I have it captured on camera and you can see my progression over the years by watching these videos. I think that's a really cool thing about having a YouTube channel, is that your growth is there for everyone to see. But that's all I had for you in today's video. We're now at the end of our stroll down memory lane. If you have any comments or questions about anything you've seen in this video or about anything in general, please feel free to leave those in the comment section below. And if you would like to keep up with what I'm reading and writing about right now, you can find me on a variety of places around the internets, including Goodreads and Instagram, where I'm the most active. The links to everywhere you can find me will be at the bottom of the description box below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.